Okay, so we're back with another mailbag episode. This is one where, unfortunately, you get me as well as the two lovely guys. We're going to start with some questions that you've sent in. Remember, if you want to send a message for the podcast, it's at oddtandem, anywhere on social media, or oddtandem@shockedgiraffe.com to get them in the mailbag. And someone who sent us an email to that address is Tim Farris. He asks, it seems like Breathe Right nasal strips are being used more frequently again in time trials. Is there a proven advantage to using a Breathe Right strip? Is the idea that it allows more oxygen intake? And if there is an advantage, why don't all riders use them?
I'll take this one. This is kind of a funny story. In my first Grand Tour was the 1996 Vuelta. They were handing these out like at the sign-in. And I'm just like, I'm going to start using one of those. And then I saw Tony Rominger using it. And I just had it on the whole entire Vuelta that year. And then I stopped using it in most of the road races, but it was part of my protocol for time trials. Is it proven? I never did any testing to actually prove it, but it was more of that mental, what would you call it? Maybe even a placebo that, okay, I'm going to be able to breathe a little bit better. Yeah, I wish I could say that there was something absolutely proven, but I think it's just up to the riders. I mean, Jensi, you and I have pretty big schnozzes, and anything that'll help us get a little bit more air in there could never hurt, right?
Correct. I never use them too often or almost never ever. But people, if you look at pictures of me, there's hardly ever a picture of me breathing through my nose. I always have the paint face and my mouth open like that to get enough air into my mouth. So I was just basically 100% breathing through my mouth. I never needed any nose extra pieces, but that is just me and myself.
Yeah, you had just a big old scoop open there. You should have been thinking about how many watts you were losing with your trap just wide open, sucking down air.
I mean, this is one of the few things where I've actually got some kind of link to this. I did swimming, and I played like what you'd call soccer quite a lot. And I remember the 90s when I was growing up, they were a really big thing. And I've broken my nose 6 or 7 times, and I found that all it did was just blocked one half of my nose when I used it. So it was the opposite for me. But hey, if it works, right?
7 times, huh?
Yeah.
Were you a bit of a brawler up there in the UK or what?
Just really clumsy. I ran into a basketball post once. So yeah, there's a whole load of stories there. Okay, here's a question from Vern from Charlotte, North Carolina. So not far from you, Bobby. Good afternoon, gentlemen. 40-year-old, long-time cyclist here. Used to do this Hincapie Spring Training series many years ago back in the day. I have a weird question for you, gentlemen. We all know that racers have to stop mid-race for a nature break. But have you ever witnessed a fan on the side of the road having a nature break? There never seems to be porta potties, so I can only assume it happens.
I actually did see that quite a few times. Also, I saw people smoking cigarettes and smoking the other stuff as well, because don't forget, a mountain like Alpe d'Huez, it's super famous, and they close it at least one day, often 2 days before, for cars going up and down, because there's already all these camping cars parked on each little square inch of the roadside. So they go, look, we stop it 2 days before. If you want to go up, you have to walk. So people start walking there at 9 a.m. By the time we come in there at 5 p.m. for the Grande Finale, they have been out there in the burning sun for like 6, 7, 8 hours doing nothing else but, like, in case they are males, standing there with 3 upper bodies. They are fully sunburned, fully drunk, fully stoned. So, yeah, of course, I have seen them doing all sorts of businesses.
I have to say, I've never witnessed that. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but it kind of makes me think about the Olympics this year, the final circuit. I mean, these guys are drinking all this carbohydrate. They're trying to stay as hydrated as possible. I feel so sorry for those guys if they had to take a leak in that final, 70K or whatever it was, those final 3 circuits.
Well, I mean, Nils Pollitt he stopped in a cafe and got caught on camera. So, there is a way around it, but it's not normally that civilized.
But, we have those green zones where you can just dump all your trash nowadays. I wonder if they have a circuit like that again in the Olympics or the World Championships, if they're going to have a little pee zone or something, where guys can just kind of
Porta
pull
potties.
in to a little porta john and then get back out on the road. But no, I've never witnessed that to Jensi's extent. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a lot of drunk fans on the side of the road. One caused a crash in the Tour of Spain yesterday, I believe. It's actually a miracle that it doesn't happen more often. And I think the most famous one was with Giuseppe Guarini going up Alpe d'Huez, and the little photographer kid got out in the middle of the road, and he wound up just T-boning him. And luckily, he went on to win the stage and, had no ill feelings toward this kid. But could you imagine if that happened and then he got passed right at the end by, and wound up second or third place? That would have been terrible. So, stick the nature brake, keep that off to the side behind a tree, and then give the riders a little bit more room on the road to do their job.
I was just going to ask on that. The crowds, when you're going up a mountain, does it matter which group you are in the road as to how rowdy they are? Because obviously if you're at the front, they're, that's who people have come to see more often than not. But we see these videos of the people at the back doing wheelies and stuff. Does it get more raucous at the front or at the back?
I would say cycling fans are in general, like, there's no violence, there's no hatred in between them. They share the experience, they share the love for cycling, and they are, as far as I'm concerned, are really fair. So it doesn't matter if in Tour de France, if you're French and American or German rider, they cheer you on. If you're going for the win, yes, they might be a little more excited because you're the first rider they see, but they also give you a lot of cheering if you're position 50 or 170.
Yeah. I have two friends, Eric and Carrie, who actually went over to the tour and got all dressed up and was part of that caravan of people on the side, camped out for a couple days. He had like a wrestler mask on, and he was a very buff, kind of tattooed guy. So he had like a tiny Speedo, and they filmed that. And I was like, man, that's a party up there. I would like to go and experience that one day. I know I'm getting older. I'm not going to have the little Boris outfit on or showing my buttocks running alongside the group. But I would say they're extremely supportive and almost frantic for the lead riders. And then they're very, very supportive in a different way to the riders that are further back. They're handing them food. They're giving them pushes up the road. It's a pretty cool atmosphere, but there is nothing like being in that front. And I wasn't in the front very often, but going through that tiny corridor of road, you couldn't even hear yourself think. We didn't have race radios back then, but if somebody was saying something over the race radio, you would never have even been able to hear it because it's that loud. And you get done or you get out of that zone where there's so many people or into the barriers, and your ears are ringing, and it's a really weird sensation, I think.
Maybe we need an odd tandem trip to a race to experience it. There's a message here from Marila Ferrier, who says, and this is the best description of the race I've ever heard. This year in the Tour de France, Homs, Sandswift, so the male version, a big talking point was the gravel stage, and there's been one in the Vuelta as well. The main thing I've heard pros say is that they hated to ride it, but would have loved to watch it. Or they loved watching it, but glad they weren't riding. I want to hear Bobby and Jens's biggest gaps are in terms of the kind of race they'd hate racing themselves, but absolutely love watching for entertainment reasons.
Oh, for me, that's simple. Anything with cobblestones. Anything with cobblestones. I mean, Paris-Roubaix, there would have to be an absolute nuclear war for me to miss that on TV. I plan out that entire day. I get my snacks, I get my beers, and I am just in it from kilometer zero if possible. But would I want to ride those cobblestones? No, because we had Sylvain Dillier on recently, and he was talking about the blisters that he had on his hands, and you hear the horror stories about what these riders have to deal with after doing Roubaix, either the men or the female. So as much as I love watching it, no, I think I made the right decision staying out of that race.
I would pick the same, the classics, the couples, but something different as well. The medicine at World Championships or Olympics. It looks like absolute carnage, but I love watching it. But it's so hard to keep control from my quiet TV seat. Imagine you in the race, your heart beats up to here, 200 heart rate, you're doing 50 kilometers an hour. And you go, where's my teammate again? He's over there. So I got to go up and down and sling him in. It's absolutely fascinating how that works. But so I love watching that, but I'm happy I'm not racing that one.
Yeah, I you know what? I totally agree. That is such a cool event, but I cannot understand how you can sling your teammate in who's going much slower than you in the middle of the field without crashing. Like, everybody has to have their head on a swivel at all times. And, we saw a couple little crashes and a couple little bumps, a couple rubs, but no, thank you. Absolutely no, thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you on both of those. I love both of them, and COVID was obviously a really strange thing for a lot of people, and there were different moments of disappointment. But I remember turning to my girlfriend and saying, "They've cancelled Paris-Roubaix," and she was like, "Oh." And I was like, no, you don't understand. This has been like, the wars didn't stop this. This shouldn't stop. It's the worst day of COVID, honestly, the whole thing. Something else that's been related to recent events. A man who was the star of the Olympics in many ways, Remco. He came through, he dominated, he got 2 gold medals. Paul Newman, not that Paul Newman, asks, how can Remco be that strong at 134 pounds? This is particularly talking about the time trials. This is just after he won that. This came in.
Well, he did something right. Because he changed as a rider after that crash in Pays Basque. We saw it in the Dauphiné. We saw it in the Tour. People have come on our podcast and told us how more relaxed he is. Strength is one thing, but momentum is another. And he came out of the Tour having won a stage, getting 3rd overall, and then somehow being able to recover and just had the form of his life at the right time. I think the thing that makes him so dangerous in time trials is that he doesn't have to tweak his body to be in the most aerodynamic position. When we had Josh Tarling on, he was telling us that he needs more massage and physio work on his upper body and his arms than his legs because he's trying to get into that Remco position. So I don't know, but Jens, you remember what it felt like when you came out of the Tour. You were either flying or dying, right? Like, you just had another gear, and it's a very fragile switch between on and off after the Tour de France. And somehow he was able to keep his on, and he actually seemed to be even stronger in the Olympics than he was in the Tour de France. So, yep. I will admit it. I think I've said it on this podcast before. I was not the biggest Remco Evenepoel fan, but he has definitely changed me. Like, I am definitely rooting for him a lot more than I used to. He did something right, and I hope he continues to do those things right. And, maybe I'll get a Remco Evenepoel fan club shirt to wear on the podcast.
I was going to say tattoo. Yeah.
No tattoo. No.
I was just going to say, just quickly on that, is you were a time trialist, Jens. You've ridden time trials to a high level. Like, there's a lot about his position and the lack of power, which I think was what Paul was getting at. It's not just power and power to weight, is it? It's your CDA, isn't it? That's the thing that defines it. So that's part of the reason he's so quick, right?
Well, I guess also Bobby's the man for numbers and science, but just to put it like in an easy way to understand, Remco is lighter, but also shorter. So if he sits on a bike, he creates a lot less air resistance because the surface of Remco and his bike facing the wind is a lot smaller than the surface of Gunnar with 1.90 m or Josh Tarling. So if the all three, or let's say Josh Tarling and Remco, trying to do 50 kilometers an hour, right, the same speed, Joshua Tarling would need to push 415 watts maybe, and Remco only 315. So maybe Remco cannot produce 700 watts for 20 minutes, but he never needs to do that because he creates less less air resistance. So that's an advantage. And when it comes to the Olympic road race, it wasn't like a sprint race. It wasn't a classics race. It was just a race of arbitration. And his smaller and more narrow and lighter body carries also less weight around. So he has simply less muscles he needs to supply with oxygen, water, and energy than a bigger and taller and stronger rider. So Remco would probably never win a race that's 50 kilometers long or 35 miles because he would be too small and it would be like the brute big guys winning that race. But since cycling is such a long race and mainly made for endurance, Remco's smaller and lighter body doesn't give him a disadvantage really at all.
It's the same like Tom Pidcock in the mountain bike races, right? Like he is a small dude. We've had him, I've seen interviews with him where I'm just like, he looks like a 12-year-old little kid, but like he's this monster on a bike. So, that's the greatest thing about cycling, and you'll see this on any group ride, that there's no perfect phenotype of body, right? Like you got big, you got small, you got in the middle, you got lean, you got muscular, you got, maybe a little bit more fat, but can still, win races compared to, super, super skinny people. So yeah, it's interesting. And go back and listen to our podcast that we had, what was it? One of our first ones with Robbie Ketchel. And he spoke a lot about CDA and the importance of it. And CDA meaning coefficient of aerodynamic drag, or coefficient de drag aerodynamique, to get the CDA.
Amazing. And I was just one last follow-up on that. I mean, there aren't many time trialists at the moment that have Remco's body type. Is that a case of he's kind of broken a barrier down for a lot of people now, and maybe some people that would go, well, I'm not the right shape to do time trialing, they might consider it? Or is that just that he's that much better and he's, changed it because he's exceptional as a rider?
We can't forget about Jonas Vingegaard in the Tour de France 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a very small guy and he produced some amazing power. But when I heard his post-race interview, he said that his pacing strategy was 360 watts and he was going 380. That doesn't sound like much when we had Josh Tarling saying that he's shooting for 480. Mm-hmm. So, kind of back to Jens's point, it doesn't matter the power. It's a combination of the CDA, the power, the form, the morale, the aerodynamics that they have. And I don't think there's a single big GC guy that hasn't been spending a lot of time in the wind tunnel. We saw with Sepp Kuss in the Vuelta time trial, he needs to get in the wind tunnel a little bit. If he wants to, really guarantee that he's going to be a year in, year out GC guy, he can't be losing, over a minute in a 7-kilometer time trial to the favorites.
There is a question about Sepp coming up a bit later on, but we'll leave that for a moment. This came from Scott on our Patreon page, so thanks, Scott, for that. In the last episode, so this is the last Mailbag episode, the two of you discussed being on the same team and growing your friendship. What was it like being friends, but on different teams? Did you find yourself gravitating towards each other in the peloton when not required to do teamwork? Would you talk smack about the opposing team or their bikes or how their kit looked? Or were you strictly on team-only lockdown?
Oh, we definitely gravitated towards each other. That's for sure. And I think we basically are the same age. We married with kids, so we talked a lot about kids, how the little angels and hellraisers within 1 minute of time, and how do we deal with the challenges of being an athlete and as a pro cyclist. You should ride your bike. If you cannot do that, you should lay down. If you cannot lay down, you should sit. If you cannot sit, you should be standing, and walking or running should be the last thing. But as soon as I would come home and my cleats would make this typical click, click, click noise they make when they hit a hard surface, when I walk towards the garage to put my bike away, the kids would coming running out of the house. Dad, let's go to the zoo. Dad, let's go and get ice cream. And I cannot have ice cream. I can have a water because ice cream is just fat and sugar, so it's not good for me. So, how to deal with these daily challenges. There was a lot of talks, Bobby and we had. I don't think, Bobby, we ever talked much about cars or expensive watches, didn't we?
No, we didn't. But so from those 2 years together at Credit Agricole, and then I left and I went to German Team Telecom. Like my buddy is a German, and he's one of the best riders on the planet, and he was never on Team Telecom. So that was always kind of ironic and funny, and we'd talk about that a lot. And then of course at CSC we were best of friends. But when I switched teams and Jens switched teams, like so we rode. I worked for CSC Saxo Bank, and Jens was a rider, and then he left to go to Leopard Trek, and I went to Sky. We always had this yearly kind of get together after Paris-Nice, where he would come up to my house. We'd go out for Mexican food. We'd come back up, have some Coronas, and just relax a little bit. He'd go on some of those geocaching things. Do you still do that geocaching?
Absolutely. We're up to 2,300 found caches right now.
Amazing.
When he told me, like, after the Mexican that, hey, there's a little cache around the corner, and then he goes and gets it and he holds it up. I have a picture of it. And I'm just like, that's so dumb. Like, why? And he absolutely loved it. But that was where it was kind of tricky, because I was working for another team and he was riding for another team. And I basically said, screw it. If I get in trouble for hanging out with my best buddy, even though he's not on my team, I'll take the consequences.
Well, that was what I was going to ask on that. You're both big fans. We spend most of the week talking about cycling in one form or another. Like, did you find it difficult to not talk about cycling, or was it just you were so in it at that time, any conversation away from the sport was a relief?
I think we had a good balance there, right? We talked about cycling and gears and gear ratios and whatever fat percentage, diets, how we can increase our performance with better training, better aerodynamics. But we also talked about, hey, where you go on holiday? Never heard of that. Where is that? How is it over there?
Yeah, and if you don't know Jens, he's a walking encyclopedia. So he knows so much about Europe, especially about Germany, about everything that you didn't really have to talk about cycling too often. And, one thing that I tried to talk to him about that he never listened to was, I had this little Swiss ball and I do my core work on the Swiss ball, and I was always stretching. I always had a blanket down on the ground. And, he'd always look down at me when I was on the ground and be like, I need to start that. I need to start that. And when I saw something that he was at a training camp and he was actually participating in these stretching core exercises. And I was like, you son of a gun. Like, we could have been doing that the whole time. And now that I leave, you all of a sudden are this core routine specialist. I was like, what a faker.
Well, I lasted about 3.5 days with him, so I was
just
never
for the
good.
camera, just for social media. Yeah,
Exactly.
I figured.
But I remember, Bobby, one time, I believe, tour of Germany. We are riding through Germany, and I point out, hey, you see that big castle up there? That is where Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther was held almost hostage to protect himself from getting killed by the church. Anyway, within 2 years' time, Martin Luther translated the Bible from Latin language into German, the way we speak it. And by the way, he created the first basic rules of the German we speak today. And you went, wow, awesome, so much history. We were in a race, and you were like, wow, how cool is that?
Yeah,
the German language was created on that castle up there.
It wasn't like we were like in the car or in the bus before or after. Like, you're giving us this whole spiel, like when we're like going at 45K an hour. I was like, okay, man, that's really cool, but we got a race to think about here.
So this is what I love about these podcasts, these mailbag ones. Scott sent a message and he was expecting you to be talking smack about kit, and you're actually talking about Martin Luther and the reformation of the German church in the middle of a race. Brilliant.
Yes, in the middle of a race. Absolutely.
You mentioned a little bit about language there. Elia Villia on Facebook, she says, languages in the tour. Does everyone speak more than one language? If someone doesn't speak a certain language, are they less likely to be signed by certain teams? So if you don't speak French, will you not get signed by someone like AG2R? And what are memorable moments you've had with fans on the course as a rider or a spectator, positive or negative?
I remember, I don't think it's like this anymore, but on so many French teams and Spanish teams, they only spoke French or Spanish. Now, I mean, you could have a full-on conversation with Roman Bardet in English. Matteo Jorgensen speaks French, Spanish, obviously English. Like a lot of riders seem to be quadlingual now. Like back in the day, the only riders that spoke multiple languages were, us knuckleheads, and then especially the Swiss guys. They would speak 4, 5, 6 languages. It was pretty impressive. I don't know what it's like anymore, but I get the feeling that English is the big one. And I know that French teams would sign somebody that doesn't speak French, but they would motivate them to take little linguistic classes in the off season because that's a hard language to learn especially when you're an American, for me at least, with the accents and stuff. But I don't know. What do you think, Yenzi? I mean, you're around the sport, boots on the ground with these guys a lot more than I am these days.
Well, let's start. My first big team was Ghana, which then later became Call. And he said, yep, Jens, we sign you. I only had a 1-year deal. But we sign you. We want you to move to France, to be part of our culture, learn our language, and be closer to the team. So I would have no license at all to live in Germany or anywhere else. I said, no, we want you in France to learn our language, be part of our culture. That has changed a lot. And Bobby, you're right. English is the main language because everybody understands. Also, in our early years, if you were a British or an American cyclist, you were exotic. You were like, wow, one of the few, even a Swedish rider was, oh, wow, a Swedish rider. Most of the peloton was Spanish, Italian, or France, right? Tour de France back in the days, 100 French riders and a few foreigners. That has changed a lot. Now we got riders from Australia, Japan, Africa. Binyam Gemay, opens opens the path for African cycling even more. So being exotic is normal these days, right? The Tour de France has probably, 20, 30, maybe 20 nations starting there. So English is definitely the language. Also, in my first 1 or 2 years of cycling, only French was the official cycling language. Then later they changed it to English, so you could also do some UCI test and UCI, let's say, if you want to become a commissaire, you could do all that in English as well. So yes, it is more open, and everybody speaks probably, 2 languages, I would say, at least, yes.
And there's multiple, to the second part of your question or her question, about good experiences and bad experiences with fans. There were multitudes, thousands each way, I think. But one really sticks out to me was the year, it was the 1998 Tour de France, and we were going up the Col de Madeleine, and Pantani and Ulrich were up the road. I was sitting in second position at that time. I wound up third, and they just went on a totally different speed than me. So I'm at the top of the Madeleine, didn't really know what a gram of carbohydrate was back then. So I'm bonking right at the top, and I'm like, man, I'm not going to be able to make this. And I come around the corner, and I kid you not, there was an angel with a can of Coke or a bottle of Coke, where you could twist off the top. And I'm like, am I seeing this? Am I hallucinating? Like, this is an angel sitting there with the Coke? So I grabbed the Coke, and I went back and watched the footage of the race, and it was an angel. It was Specialized was doing some publicity, and she was kind of like, she just had her angel wings, and she gave me that Coke. So that was like my best memory because it absolutely saved me. And then one of the worst memories was, I think it was Tour of Germany, and we were at the start line, and these days were different. And I remember, Jens, you were in the yellow jersey, and there was a German guy, and just within earshot of me, he was saying bad things about you, like, traitor, because you were on a Danish team and you were winning the Tour of Germany. And I remember I turned around and I got so mad at this person. Like, this guy does everything and he is one of the best German riders, and you deserve more respect than that. So those are my two little positive and negatives, and I'm sure I have a lot more, but those were the ones that came up to the top of my head when you asked that question.
And talk about languages. People speak 2 or 3 languages, but believe me, we can swear at least in 15 languages. One time, honestly, I had a puncture on my mountain bike, like one of these terrible, stupid, cold, rainy November days. I was out on a mountain bike, rain, wet, muddy, I had cold fingers, trying to change a tire. I kind of like twisted my fingers, I was hurting. I was swearing so colorful in this forest that the trees were blushing. The trees were turning away from me. I was swearing in Japanese, Russian, Italian, French, Spanish, German, British, or English words. It was fantastic. I felt so much better after that. So swearing is our strength. We probably know at least 15 languages we can swear in.
Okay, so like we've spoken about the lingua franca being English, it used to be French or Spanish. Is there a lingua franca most commonly used language for swearing in the peloton? Is there one that everyone goes to because the words are really good? They really get the emotion across.
But I believe Italian, it's probably up there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we cannot say the words here now, but important is,
and we don't even know what they mean,
Yeah.
So like when you'd say them thinking that, hey, I'm just going to fit in and this guy's going to be like, know that I'm not happy with him. He'd look at me like shocked that I said that. I'm like, you guys say it all the time. Why can't I say it to you? But we never really understood. Oh, no, you can't say that.
And if you swear in Italian, very important, keep your hands like this. You have to talk like this and really fast. That is typically Italian swearing.
Your best and worst experience, obviously with a spectator, Jens, you got a bike off one, so that must have been a pretty good one. But have you got any other good and bad memories?
I got a good memory, yes. I opposite to Bobby. Bobby was racing LPS. I was always dropped, right? My job was the valley before to, get Carlos Sastre and the Schleck brothers into LPS. Then I was dropped. So I'm all by myself, dropped from the first group, not caught by the peloton yet. So I'm all by myself, looking down, trying to save a little bit of energy because a few more days. Suddenly, don't laugh too early. Suddenly I hear a voice, Jens, I love you. I want you, baby. And I'm looking up. It's a 55-year-old man with a huge belly, like this little spandex jersey almost exploding, like big black beard, like some 50+ years old, yelling at me on top of his lungs, Jens, I love you. I want you, baby. So even I had to laugh with him. Another, worst experience was also on LPS when we had an individual time trial up there, a hilltop time trial. And just the day before, I was in a breakaway. They called me back because Ulrich had attacked, and my team called me back, said, Jens, we need you to come back. Ulrich is gone. We got not enough men here. We need you in a peloton help chasing for Ivan Basso, who was second at the time, right? And Ulrich was about to pass him. So I stopped on the roadside, waited for the peloton, and helped to chase Jan Ulrich back. And somehow it became almost a misunderstanding with German TV. They did a few just unlucky words, and then it ignited itself. The next day on the individual time trial, I heard every bad word, every animal name, rat being almost the nicest one, you can ever imagine. I actually, every time I saw a fan like getting one step onto the road, I like brace myself, okay, if he hits me, how do I react on this? If he hits me, do I hit him back or I just ignore it, keep racing? So I was so tensed up the entire 16, 17 kilometers up there because I expected somebody's going to hit me in the face any moment. So that was by far the worst and the only time really I experienced so much hatred by people.
I remember that. I was at the truck because I went before you because that was when I had my broken wrist. And you came to the truck after the time trial and you were just ranting. Like you were so disappointed in these people. And most of them were Germans that were yelling these things at you. and you just went on this rant that I think was caught on. Remember, we had the film crew for Overcoming. So yeah, a lot of that was caught on film, and I was just like, oh man, stay out of his way. But it looked like you could have gone down to the bottom and done another time trial. You were like so amped up after that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. There was a lot of anger and disappointment in me on that day. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a message here from Trudy Louise on who sent this via Facebook, and she was at the centre, or she was witness to one of the greatest Tour de France moments ever. She said, I was living in France and was on the Champs-Elysees to witness Le Monde come from behind to beat Fignon. To me, this is bike racing at its best, where you never say die and you fight to the bitter end. So there's a two-part question that follows on from this. Firstly, why did the format change so the last day is nothing more than a glorified parade lap for the GC, obviously excluding this year? I grew up following cycling during what I would call the glory days, and the thought of gifting a stage to say thank you to your teammate, I don't think would ever have happened. So why is it considered racing when the strongest rider doesn't win a stage or perhaps even the race? Does the winner not feel this is a hollow victory of sorts? Specifically, I'm thinking about last year's Vuelta. I'm all for Sepp Kuss, and I give him kudos, but if his teammates hadn't been told to back off, essentially he wouldn't have won. Popular does not mean best. That's fighting talk. What do you say?
Man, we have to urge our listeners and viewers to send in some shorter questions because there was quite a few things there. So gifting a stage. I was never in that situation. I don't know if I would have wanted to, but I do remember exactly where I was in 1989 when Greg LeMond won that time trial. It ignited something in me. But that was they didn't have the time trial as the last stage very much. It is that procession. The race is over. It kind of gives a reward to the people that finish the Tour de France, that they have a beautiful run into Paris, and then once you get into Paris, then it's full gas. And as we saw in the Olympics this year, Paris ain't a bad place to finish a bike race. It's not a bad place to do anything really, right? So I'm not a big fan of time trial on the last day. The Tour of Spain this year is going to end with a time trial. It started with a time trial. It's going to end with a time trial. I think it's better for the fans to have that party atmosphere, that celebratory vibe at the end of a race instead of just watching a bunch of guys come through with like Spaceball helmets on. But yeah, the gifting a stage thing, like I said, I never did it myself, but when Lance Armstrong gifted Marco Pantani the win up on top of Alpe d'Huez on Mont Ventoux, one of the years that he won, I was just like, I wonder what Marco felt about that, or why Lance did that. But if it's a teammate, Alpe d'Huez with Hinault and Le Monde, it looked like Bernard Hinault was going to gift Greg LeMond the win, and then at the last second he kind of pushed his bike, just 1 inch ahead of Greg's. And I don't know. I guess when you're at that level, it doesn't really matter. But not a big fan of the gifting the stage thing. But to defend Sepp Kuss, I don't think anybody gifted anything to him because they attacked him on that final uphill stage, and he held on. He limited his losses. He may not have been in that position of having that advance, when he got into that breakaway because they were looking at Jonas and Primoz a little bit too much. But they did not seem like they were slowing down. That last day, yeah, I think they said, okay, we got a lot of bad press. This isn't good. But, Sepp sacrificed so much for those two guys that I was actually sickened when they just kept going full gas. And then luckily came to their senses the next day and didn't attack him. But I don't think they really gifted him much. What do you think, Jens?
I totally agree with all you said, and I could talk an hour about all this. Let's start with the easy part, the TTs. Yes, they are dramatic, but a Grand Tour is 21 stages. So if the last day is this a parade, which then ends up in a really tough, hard sprint, right? The first part is parade, taking pictures, talking to friends. Second half of the race on the last day is actually a really hard race for the sprinters as well. People had 20 days, 20 stages to fight out the classement. So they don't need 21 days. Like, the result is the same. They had 20 days time to make sure the best is in the front. So give them that easy day. I still try to remember my days as a rider. I was so grateful and thankful for this parade and the love and respect from the spectators. They would be there in Paris on the Champs-Élysées to see this. It was a really good, great, magic moment, and I was grateful to experience that instead of being, sweat covered, out of breath, with that helmet on and just shooting down the road. And most people cannot win the TT anyway. So out of 176 riders, they start in the Grand Tour, maybe 6 can win, and another 10 go for GC, and the rest you go, it's just another day. I need to go to the finish line. So I think every 20 years, every 15 years, they can change it up with the TT, but it should stay the parade. I support that. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. It's just my opinion. About gifting a stage. There's an example out of my own experience. Giro Italia, we have Ivan Basso in leader's jersey. He already won 2 or 3 stages. And I think we were leading the team GC as well. So then Bjarne Ries, my sport director back then in the CSC days, comes on and goes, hey, actually, we want everybody to stay with Ivan. He's in the leader's jersey, except for you, Jens. If there's a break, 10 riders or more, you go and you be policing the breakaway. So in case something goes bad on the last mountain, you can always drop back and help our leader. Okay, chef. So I catch the break, 12 riders. I said, hey, listen, guys, I'm just here to watch this. I cannot work. I got my captain and friend and teammate back there in the leader's jersey. They never give me any shit. They never give me any stress. I said, look, I cannot work. Halfway through the stage, I go, hey, Bjarne, how does it work back there? Could I maybe start turning a little bit so I would earn the right to go for the finish, to go for the win? Bjarne goes, nah, you just sit there and wait. They start attacking each other. I always follow the fastest group, so it goes down to 6 riders, to 5 riders. Hey, Bjarne, can I start working to earn the right to go for the stage win? No, Jens, I told you to sit. In the end, we had 2 riders left, Manuel Garate and myself. And Garate was back then with Quick-Step. They had Bettini there in a world champion jersey, sacrificed himself for Garate and another 1 or 2 riders. They all were just killing themselves to make the race harder, so Garate, their best climber, could win the stage. So it's Garate and myself. And I go, hey, Manuel, listen, I cannot win this. You win. It's your stage. It's only 3 kilometers to go, 2 kilometers to go. You win this one. I will not sprint for this one. And more or less right then, Bjarne comes on and goes, hey, Jens, everything's under control in the peloton. You can go for the win. And I said, Bjarne, I cannot win. I just gave him my word that I will not sprint and I don't deserve it. So Garate didn't really believe it until he crossed the line that I actually gave it to him. And I made sure he feels safe. So I left him 50 meters out there so he would be safe that I'm not going to outsprint him. And I believe Juan Manuel, he still talks about it. He's sport director now with Ineos Grenadiers, and a German friend of mine, Andreas Klier, former rider. He said, yeah, like whatever, once a month or so he mentioned you and that win, that he's still so flattened and so impressed that you gave it to him. And also, could I have won the stage? Yes, of course. But can I steal the candy from a small kid? Yes, of course. But I just don't do that. Can I steal the purse of an old lady? Yes, of course. But you just don't do that. And if you don't work for 200 kilometers, you cannot outsprint the poor fellow next with you who worked for 200 kilometers. So I didn't really feel like giving away the stage. I just showed respect to the men or the teams doing the work. So, yeah, I think it's okay every now and then just out of respect. And with Sepp Kuss, Bobby, I agree 50%. They did not wait for Sepp Kuss last year in the Vuelta. until the last day, like you said, they realized we got so much bad press, so much stress. Even I was quite vocal and had my opinion outlook. This is just wrong. Primož Roglič that year won the Giro Italia. Not 100% but a large part of it was Sepp Kuss being there, being a loyal teammate and saving his ass again and again. Jonas Vingegaard won the Tour de France that year, also because Sepp Kuss was there saving his ass again and again. So I feel, you two are no humans? Just give the man some respect. He sacrificed 3 years of his life serving you, making you win the big races. So this would be the moment to go, hey, Sepp, we are so happy that you have a chance to win this one. Of course this is for you. So it took a big no from the probably higher ups to tell them to stop chasing Sepp Kuss. So they didn't really want to give it to him, but the team decided, stop this. This is for Sepp Kuss now, and we gonna make sure he wins. I don't think the other two were too happy about it. And Primož Roglič is not in that team anymore. So I guess they didn't really give it to him. He really had to work hard for it.
I was in that race in the Giro in 2006 when this happened with Jens. And we could hear it on the radio. We could hear the direct order from Bjarne. Jens, you win. No, Bjarne, I'm not. And cross the finish line, behind you guys, or in the peloton. And I don't think I've ever been more proud to call you my friend than after that, when I saw you in the bus. I remember giving you the biggest hug, and I was just like, I don't know if I could have done that in that situation. I wasn't as prolific of a winner as you were, but I was so proud to call you a friend after that stage for the person that you were, for the morals that you had concerning that situation. And I'm glad he tells that story, because it's a story worth being told over and over.
Thank you, Bobby.
Oh, it was lovely. Just one final point. You sort of mentioned neither of you would be particularly a fan of coming in for a time trial into Paris for that final stage. Something that was mooted quite a lot during the Olympics. How would you feel if that finishing circuit was the final stage of the Tour?
It would be impossible. That would be no fun at all. I think they keep it the way that they've had it, the way that it's always been, a sprinter stage. Like Jens said, there's already 20 stages that climbers and breakaway specialists can go for. That was crazy crowds on some very, very small streets with 90 people in the peloton. And that peloton thinned out to 50 pretty quickly, right? So can you imagine, 176 guys start the Tour de France, say 150 on a good year could maybe finish the Tour de France? That circuit with 150 guys and all the cars? No way. It was gorgeous to watch. I mean, it was so awesome seeing that on TV. And I'm glad we got to witness that. But I'm glad it was definitely, that reduced peloton, or it would have been nuts.
Well, call me a dreamer, but how about that? Instead of having the Saturday or Friday stage in Alpes, have an entire weekend in Paris and reenact the entire Olympics. Have a TT on Friday on the same circuit, maybe a little longer. And, well, the roads are too small. I agree with that, Bobby. But have a long, tough, hilly circuit in Paris on Saturday, and then on Sunday you have the Champs-Élysées parade and everybody can be happy cruising down the Champs-Élysées. Maybe have an entire weekend in Paris.
Yeah, just paralyze the whole entire city for not 1 day, but 3. Yeah, that makes sense, Jensi. You should propose that to L'Appartient.
We might have a chance because the city mayor, Anne Hidalgo, she is big into getting traffic out of the city, having speed 30 zones everywhere, electric traffic, having bikes everywhere. So we would actually have a chance to get her on our podcast, I believe.
Hey, well, we'll get Prudhomme and her together and we'll sort this out. But that was a brilliant mailbag episode. Thanks very much for sending in your questions. Remember, if you want to get your question in the next one, anywhere you see @oddtandem, message these guys directly. or send it to oddtandem@shockgiraffe.com and we'll get you answered. Thanks so very much.